Well, it's hard to talk about never again because that encompasses a lot of future. So, yeah. Let's see what other.
I think verse 6 is strange.
Which chapter?
34. Well, 5. So there died Moshe, servant of the Govi, in the land of Moab, and they brought her.
And no one knows his burial place to this day. Which day? I thought this was written 3,200 years ago. To this day.
Well, that
sounds like it was written hundreds of years later.
Exactly.
Sorry.
It says he buried him in the
So
valley in the land
34
of
verse
Moab.
2, which one?
God
5 and
buried
6.
him. It's saying God buried him. Hashem.
But that's just so interesting to me. Why does he need to be buried? What is he hiding? What is God hiding? Why does we bury what we want to hide?
Right.
We suppress the things that we don't want to deal with.
They don't want Moses worship. They don't want people making a pilgrimage to Moses.
Okay.
grave.
Okay.
That's
Yeah, maybe that is it.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's why. I mean,
Yeah, that's like the traditional Jewish
But-
interpretation.
Okay.
but they're. I mean, the Hasids are. They have memorials and monuments to their various rabbis.
Right, so imagine what they'd do if there was a Moses' grave. Like, people would just be traipsing there, would be Mosesites instead of Jews.
You'd
Right.
be doing Torah study at Moses' grave.
Right. That'd be badass. But yeah. Well, so Baruch HaGever gets a memorial, but not Moshe Rabbeinu.
Right, because who's Baruch?
Baruch
Goldstein,
the guy who
right.
shot up.
Because, I mean, a majority of Jews are not going to bow down and worship Baruch Goldstein. He's not really a threat. He's just like he's a fringe. He's got a fringe appeal.
So far.
Do you consider Baruch Goldstein a hero?
I don't want to get into that.
Sorry, I'm just curious.
Yeah, everyone. Look, on Baruch Goldstein, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. There's no.
Like, some people think he did right by shooting out 32 Arabs in a mosque, and some people think he did wrong. They're just
Taku. When the Mashiach gets here, he'll tell us.
It's really explained whether that was right or wrong. Like, it's like there are different perspectives.
Well, there certainly are. There certainly are different perspectives. He has more faith. He's one of those people who has more, whose fan base is larger than it sometimes appears. But
Frightening. I find it frightening that anyone would think Baruch Goldstein is a hero. I just want that out there.
they should be. Yeah. In fact, it's a medical issue if they do. I think. I mean, I'm conscious. Maybe I'm getting too metaphorical or hippy dippy here, but I just, when the Lord came from Sinai, He shone upon them from Seir. He appeared from Mount Paran. I just look at those things and I say they're talking about the source of revelation, and God and revelation comes to you from Sinai, it comes from Seir, and it comes from Mount Paran. So Seir is where Esau's descendants live, and Mount Paran is where Ishmael was consigned, I think. So, to me, there's an implicit message in that. It's saying that divinity it makes itself evident, and insight makes itself comes to you, but both from places of clear revelation like Sinai, but it also comes from dealing with the Romans and who are the descendants of Esau, with strength, with power, dealing with that, and with the descendants of Ishmael, who was crazy like an ass, they said, and crazy and dangerous, so that you can find the truth in all these places. And to me, that's insightful, actually, because it validates an opinion I already have. So, I mean, do you guys see what I'm talking about there, or no?
Sure.
Yeah. I like it.
It's just, yeah.
I think it's interesting, chapter 33, verse 8, that the Levites are praised for doing God's will without respect to family ties. Like, you don't get a lot of that in Judaism. While almost every other religion, when they start out, they encourage people to break ties with family and go pursue the truth. Like, family gets a lot of respect in Judaism. But here, the Rebbe Wikipedia has it really well. Where is it? Moses prayed that God would be with the Levites who disregarded family ties to carry out God's will.
Right.
You don't get a lot of that encouragement but I mean, in the end, God is God, and family does come second. But.
Right. But yeah, I mean, this is it's like monastic orders where they're married to Jesus or married to. I think the Levites here, it's like, no, for you, the priesthood, you're married to Israel, and that's your.
Right.
That's your spouse, that's your concubine, you don't get any others. And yeah, I mean, it's a tough lot, but I mean, it really seems to work. If you look, I remember being in an evangelical church and watching a bunch of these young guys, and they're in their early 20s, and traditionally you would have been married off by then and sowing your oats. They're not. They're starved for women, I mean, desperately. And all that passion and energy went into their singing of these evangelical songs. So you can see how you would want, your priesthood, all that energy just goes towards worshiping the Lord and yeah.
So, Monica, why did you choose Judaism? Why did you get into Judaism? What drew you?
It had to do with Torah study. I mean, it had to do with Midrash. I mean, that was the big impetus for me, discovering Midrash and Midrashic interpretation, the idea that, you'd probably disagree with this, but the idea that Torah is evolving, that revelation is ongoing, that creation is ongoing. I mean, that's getting into Rosenzweig and all that, but I don't know, just this idea of being able to respond to gaps and silences and inconsistencies and contradictions and ambiguities in the Hebrew Bible with something else.
But why didn't you just become a secular lawyer? Because everything you just said, isn't that part of secular American law?
Maybe the impulse is, maybe that is drawn from, Midrashic biblical exegesis. I mean, maybe that as a technique, as a structure.
Where do you see the difference? Like, clearly you find Jewish texts more exciting than American legal texts. You didn't choose to become a lawyer.
No way.
But
it's either become a lawyer or convert to Judaism.
But you see the similarities, like everything you were just telling about filling in the blanks and interpreting through time and.
No. In a legal context, there are often absolutes, or there are concrete facts. There's one way to do something, usually, unless you find a loophole. I don't think that's how it is with Torah. I mean, that's the idea of creation being ongoing. I mean, it's something that's created anew all the time. And there's an ethics to it that isn't present in legal texts, necessarily. I mean, not like halakhic legal texts, but legal in our sense of the American judicial sense of the term.
So what's different about Midrash from other literary techniques or other literary traditions? Like, what's special?
Midrash is different because, as other people have said, it's neither literature nor commentary, right? It's something in the middle of them because it's responding to that gap in a primary text, but it extends that primary text. It doesn't create something else to stand in for it. It literally responds and extends the Hebrew Bible, right? Other kinds of criticism or, exegesis don't necessarily do that. I think that's what's interesting about it.
Because you must have you've got a PhD in literature, so you must have done a ton of literary theory. So clearly this one, out of all the other ways of looking at literature, excites you.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that it can be applied. I mean, if we want to say this Midrashic idea, not Midrash, classical Midrash, but the Midrashic idea, it is applicable to other kinds of texts. I mean, other kinds of literature, as a way of like responding and extending. But I guess what's interesting about it is what happens when you apply it to, I don't even want to say theology, but the spiritual, the personal, to Torah. What happens to it? I mean, how much greater does Torah become when you think of it in this way? And it's antithetical to the Christian one way. There's one way. Jesus is the only way. There's one way.
Right.